Hi, good morning. Thank you for joining. Welcome to pretty much what's going to be the first one of our sort of a college applications changes series. So with that said, let's get started. So before we actually get into the topics and everything, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of who I am and what we'll be talking about. So if you're going through this process right now, then you already know
Hi, good
just
morning.
how
Thank you for joining.
frustrating and annoying
Welcome
it can
to
be.
pretty much what's going to be the first one of our
And
sort of a college applications
just a second.
changes series. So, with that said,
Okay, so just sorry for that quick interruption. Technical glitch on my end. So a little bit backwards. So going back to me. So if you're going through this process, you know exactly the frustration that comes into it, the anxiety that comes into it. And that's even without all the COVID kicking in. Um, so I realized, and not too long ago, I went through the same process. I mean, it wasn't long ago, about a little over a decade ago, but we went through the same process. And my friends and I back then, we would just ask each other for information. Sometimes we would go to counselors, but ultimately, we realized as I got into this industry and even now that there were so many opportunities, so many scholarship opportunities, so many um, university searches, like apply universities we could have applied to that we just missed out on. So basically this all, I actually found out back when I was in college when I first started up in this industry. And over time, it just became more and more obvious that the whole communication process between high schools and colleges and the parents and students, it was just really incomplete. And that's what led me to start my business, Let's Talk College, where my primary goal is to ensure that all families have all the information that they need so that and all of the information that you need so that you can make an informed decision based on your schedules, based on your priorities. So if you, for example, if you know when all the SATs available are, then you can look at your, let's say, not right now, but you could have looked at your sports calendar or you could have looked at your vacation calendar and said, okay, well, here's how we're going to plan this out and personalize this for us. Um, so that's just a quick overview. And now let's get started on today's topics. So we're going to go through a variety, and first one's going to be just the basic components of the college application. Then currently, because of COVID, there have been a few changes and even universities are struggling. So we're going to sort of cover the issues that universities face. Then after that, we're going into the quick SAT, ACT changes, how to conduct your university research and your sign up for college tours. And of course, the question that just about everyone has right now, which is what should we be doing? So the way this presentation is organized, and since this is the first time that we are doing this online, or this particular presentation online, I have put in several different components for breaks in between for just questions. And please feel free to just post your questions into the live chat. I will see them, but I will not answer them until we get to that particular break point. So let's say after point number 3, there's a Q&A, then after point 4, then after point 5. So I've tried to make this, even though we're all at home, and this seems kind of like a one-sided conversation where I just sit here and talk to my camera, my computer. I'm trying to make this as interactive as possible so nothing is missing from the experience, so to speak. All right, so with that said, the first part, components of the actual college application. Now, first one, and regardless of COVID, regardless of anything, this is how it's always been. And that is your course load matters the most out of your entire application, because this is what shows how you have been as a student. Yes, maybe ninth grade didn't go as well because you were transitioning. Okay, but now universities want to know, did you improve along the way? Or did you sort of stay staggering? As well as on top of that, did you change up your course load? So are you taking an AP class? Doesn't have to be 5 different AP classes where you're just overloading yourself, but are you basically leveling up as you move forward? So with Barlow, for example, we have, I know juniors are allowed to take APs, and then however, everyone's allowed to take honors. Um, some high schools have the International Baccalaureate program, and that usually starts up junior year, but that's not something to worry about. And then dual enrollment, so that's actually just, excuse me, that's pretty much when high school students take college classes. Every state, every county has a different name for this program. Some call it dual enrollment, some call it just college college classes, whatever it might be. Um, but ultimately, it's a high school student taking college classes. So, and of course, your class rank counts. And I am aware that the local high school, Barlow, does not do class ranks. So pretty much just your GPA is your main priority in your course load. Second up, so again, this, as I'm laying this out, this is how the original process was. So I will show you where the changes are, but right now, as you see it on the PowerPoint, this is how it has originally been. SATs, ACTs, they happen about seven times a year. On top of that, you have SAT subject test, and those happen roughly 6 times, or yeah, 6 times per year basically, and they're on the same days as the actual SATs. And then moving forward on the next component, we have personal statements. So when it comes to, or personal, sorry, not personal statements, personal. And when it comes to personal, you have extracurricular activities, which, you know, are your sports, your community service, any jobs that you might have had, everything that you do outside of this classroom setting. Then after that, we have honors and achievements of any sort that you might have been recognized for. So it could be you got into NHS, or you received a medal for maybe a sport, whatever, even academic, doesn't matter. Whatever your achievements are, those are a part of your application. And finally, you have your personal statements and supplementals. If you're applying for an art, then you have your portfolio, you have your portfolio or your audition, whatever it is. But your personal statement and your supplemental essays, those are what make you, they give you an idea. They give the admissions officer an idea of who you are outside of just the basic numbers of GPA and SAT or ACT. And finally, you have the recommendations that come in from your counselor, from your teachers, from whoever else that the university is asking you to obtain recommendations from. Then you have interviews. Note, not every university actually requires interviews or even offers interviews, but basically if that is an option, then I recommend signing up for it. We'll get a little more into that a few slides later. And finally, demonstrated interest. So demonstrated interest is not limited to just college tours, because ultimately it's not possible for everyone to tour every university that he or she might be interested in, whether that's a financial reason, whether that's just a timing issue. So demonstrated interest really is it's not limited to just university or college tours. It can also be how many times have you emailed the university to ask legitimate questions, not something you can find online and you just didn't run the Google search or didn't look through the website properly, but genuine questions about some sort of education program that you might be interested in, or a resource that you might be interested in, but when did you actually contact the university? So those are the 4 major parts. Now, thanks to COVID, we have a few question marks on that list. So first one, SAT, ACTs, they're kind of maybes up in the air, right? Oh, not up in the air, but they have had significant changes and cancellations recently. Extracurricular activities have been canceled. And honors and achievements, right now, everything's on hold because no one can go out to achieve anything really, at least not in school or in a physical location. If you're doing something online, go for it. So those are a few just question marks. And to address the first question, or before we address the first question mark, the current issues that universities face. In regards to SAT, ACT testing, there has been a temporary shift to test optional for most universities. I emphasize the most because there are some universities that have just left it there. There are some universities that haven't updated their websites. So they might actually, if you call them, they might be test optional. They might have switched to it, but they haven't updated their websites, so we would never know. And the temporary shift is primarily for this upcoming cycle. So you're not required to take that test to take the SAT or ACT. However, you can. And also with that, some universities are doing a temporary shift of 3 years. I don't know why at this point it's a temporary shift and why they just don't cancel the requirement, but this is just what's happening in the world right now. In terms of now, the obvious question now is, okay, well, if this is test optional, then how do I know I should take this? Do I bother taking it? Do I have to? How do I filter that out? Well, to answer that, if you find that some part of your application is lacking, and we're not talking about a huge hole in your application. So if your GPA is, well, if it's awful, then no, your SAT or ACT score is not going to compensate fully for it. But if it's just a little off, 0.2, 0.3, something like that, then that's a good SAT or ACT score can definitely help you just put you in a better outlook. So take the SAT or ACT if you're trying to sort of balance out your application. And I know that from my batch of students, I gave them the option of just canceling the whole test prep thing and just calling it a day. And they've all said, no, I prefer to continue because I have something I want to make up for. So again, that is something to think about. Now, next one up from that, we have college tours. So as I'm sure at this point everyone has noticed, because we're all sitting at home and probably watching this, or we're sitting at home because there's not much to do anymore since the first 2 weeks of COVID, we kind of cleaned up everything there was to clean up. So the next 2 weeks, we did all the baking and the Tiger King. But all the college tours have been canceled for the most part, depending on what state and so forth. But most universities have switched over to virtual platforms. Now, this isn't new, meaning there were a lot of universities actually had virtual tours available. It was just no one really looked as much before, because it just wasn't a priority when you could physically go to a location, take the tour, and get a feel for it. But now that we are at home, universities have not only gone more over to virtual tours or virtual seminars, but some universities also offer you the option to attend class because, of course, they're not in school anymore either. So that means most students are now working from home, online, Zoom classroom, which means there are classes that the admissions offices actually allow prospective students to just sit in on. I highly, highly recommend doing this because you're paying a lot for an education, and you might want to get an idea of what your classes would look like, since that's what matters in the end, right? So highly recommend doing that. And of course, another issue universities are now facing because of all the question marks with the SATs, the extracurriculars, is how should we evaluate applicants? So, and a lot of universities, again, it's up in the air from their end as well, because now these are the questions that they're thinking of. There's a lot of universities have had drops in enrollment, particularly a lot of the small ones, because now families are sitting down and asking themselves, okay, but how necessary is college right now? And even if it is necessary right now, more families and more students, they're taking gap years or gap semesters, which means the universities don't make money, while families get to save that money. So, and of course, the overarching question that has just always been there, which is college too expensive? And if you've done some of the reading online, there are professors who've just said, we know we're part of the industry, but college is just way too pricey right now. So we're hoping, because of the whole revamping in some ways and reconsiderations in some aspects, maybe this is something that will also come into question. Universities, of course, are also thinking of whether or not classes should happen in the fall. So a lot of universities at this point have said that we're at least going to create some sort of an online platform. So even if students are not on campus, they will still be in class. As to whether or not that will lead to a tuition reduction is still up in the air. And majority of the universities are waiting for more and more updates from the CDC. and from government, but have pretty much declared that they will come up and make a final decision about the fall semester coming in June, end of June or middle of July. Somewhere in that time frame, we will find out more about what's going to happen with this fall semester. Other than, I mean, regardless of that, if you're a junior right now, nothing outside of really the SAT, ACT testing and college tours, the others don't, or classes don't really concern you at the moment. So that's really for seniors who are probably starting up soon. Okay, so SAT versus ACT. Now, in this case, again, this is a quick overview because we do have a separate presentation on this, I believe on June 6th. Again, registration is on the library website. So as such, I'm going to cover the bare skeleton of what's going on with the SAT, ACT, or what the actual structure is prior to COVID, and then cover what changes have actually come up. So with that said, what are the differences between the two exams? Well, first up, the reading section. So note for the SAT, you have 52 questions for the reading and in 65 minutes. Then for the ACT, it's 40 questions in 35 minutes. So bottom line, SAT gives you more time per question than the ACT does. When it comes to what's actually covered, it's pretty much reading a passage and answering questions based on those passages. Math, we have, so SAT has a no calc and a calc section. Again, you will notice that there are more minutes. So there's more time per question than there is for the ACT. So ACT is 60 questions in 60 minutes. Math content wise, ACT includes pre-calculus, bare bones. You have to know overall topic overviews. SAT does not cover pre-calculus. It actually stops at algebra 2. The most complicated or pre-calcy it gets is trig, but I'm sure if you've learned it in school, it's just the basic SOHCAHTOA. That's it. There's no other complication in there. However, in terms of difficulty level with wording and confusion, they're roughly the same. So it's not as though one is just easier because they made the question much more obvious. They're roughly on the same boat ever since the SAT revamped in 2016. Then we have the English. English is actually just the grammar. So for both of them, it's you're reading a passage or you're reading multiple passages and there are underlined portions in each set in those passages. You pretty much just have to correct the mistakes if there are mistakes and then move on. So this one, even though ACT seems like a lot of questions, no, most students tend to finish on time because it goes by fairly quickly since you're working and reading at the same time. SAT does not have a specific science section like the ACT does. ACT, the last section of this is the science section. Again, 40 questions, 35 minutes. I've found that this is where students tend to just eat it. Because it's not that the science section actually requires any sort of science background. It's that the science section has a lot of information thrown at you in a limited amount of time. So the left side of the page will be just charts, graphs, tables, experiment descriptions, and everything that you have to understand and decipher. And then the right side will be about 5 to 7 questions based on that. But pretty much for every single question, you have to go back to this visual and then come back, then go back, come back. And just that repetition is what takes up time. So it's not that students don't know how to do the section, it's just there isn't enough time. And based on the way that the ACT is scored, or used to be scored now, this was the section that that students would just not do so well on, which would bring your overall score down. Now, ACT is bringing up changes, and we are going to address that in a minute. But back to the SAT, when I say that science and history section questions are embedded within, so there are still only 3 major sections. You still have the reading, the math, and the English. It's just in the reading, you might be reading, you might be reading a science passage, which means it might be about volcanoes, it might be about water or the Earth's atmosphere, whatever it might, insects, bats, whatever it is. and answering questions based on that reading passage. And the visuals, same thing with with the English, where one of those passages or multiple passages could just be about history or science with visuals, and you're just answering questions based off of that. So really the questions are just weaved in. And of course, which brings us to, okay, great, but what is it out of and what's considered a good score and all of that? So SATs out of 1600, that is the perfect score. Average is about a 1070 as of College Board's report from this past school year. So roughly, and again, to give you an idea, if you're looking at what a good score is, well, NYU, for example, a good score is about a 1350. So, and then if you're looking again at, let's say, BU, BC, or any of those, you're moving higher and higher to the 1400s. Harvard, you're moving like 1450 and above, like 1450 being the low mid average. And then you have two different times that go with it. So with this, the 3 hours refers to if you're doing it without the essay. And if you are doing it with the essay, then an extra 50 minutes are tacked on. With the ACT, we have, the perfect score is considered a 36, and the average score is a 21. And I'm kind of laughing because, so Ivy League category is a 32 and above, or 30, yeah, about a 32 and above. And a good score is pretty much like a 26, 27 and above. So there's a significant difference between what the average is and what is considered a good score. And same as before, the first time, so the 2 hours, 55 minutes are for if you're taking the essay without the essay, and the 3 hours, 40 minutes are if you're taking it with the essay. Okay, so now we're talking COVID changes. As you have probably experienced, since there was no way to avoid it, the March SAT was canceled. The official SAT, the national level one, and the one that was given in schools. So that one was officially canceled. Then May was canceled. Then June was canceled. So really, juniors, you lost a lot of opportunities because of these cancellations. And that's okay. It's completely out of your hands. Now, next up for SAT is the August 29th. Then the new date is September 26th. So really August 29th, August, October, November, December, those are already originally there. September 26th is just a new date that got added on. There's also talk of how there's also talk about how that March exam that juniors couldn't take, that might be moved to September. So again, that's still talk. Nothing from College Board has been finalized, but it could happen where seniors now, because juniors then, seniors now, will take this, will still have the opportunity to take that free exam. Registration for the August 29th exam does not open until the week of May 26th. Note, this will be a very popular exam because, like I just mentioned, there were 3 SATs that were canceled, so there's a lot of backup. And as such, College Board has said that priority for registration will go to all those that were either canceled from the June exam. So if they registered for June, you're moved over to the August exam, or if you have no scores on file whatsoever. Meaning, if you're doing a retake, you should probably just wait until September, it's a better move anyway, because right now we don't even know if this exam is happening in person or online. Gut instinct says that it's going to be online, simply because I can't imagine families feeling comfortable. And I've told my students this too, is I don't feel comfortable with you going out in a classroom setting and sitting there for hours just taking a test. It has to be online, just by logic. But we will see, and we will find out more as we get closer to the date. ACT, so the ones in red, they're the only ones, or they're the dates left for this school year, meaning registration is still open. And for the June 13th one, registration is open until May 22nd. However, if there are cancellations or any other updates, ACT has said that they will let everyone know during the week of May 26th. So that's something to keep an eye out for if you are registered. The second exam is in July, and That is also another one you can register for. But after that, starting in September, those registration dates do not open until late July. So those are the current dates as of right now. Again, feel free to go ahead and just plan your schedules based on, and your prep primarily, based on those. Just a quick heads up on prep. If you haven't, if you know, with the test optional, if you do decide that you want to go ahead and prep for the test, great. But keep in mind, it takes an average of, depending on how much time you're spending, it can take anywhere from 3 to 5 months to prep for an exam. Again, it's because when I work with my students, again, we start with content, and I find a lot of holes in content, particularly for the math, since you're starting with geometry and working your way up. But then it's also just practice. So there has to be time to sit there and spend the 65 minutes doing that reading drill. And with schoolwork and with extracurriculars, it just kind of all piles up and things don't necessarily get done in the most ideal scenarios. So I would roughly leave about 3 to 5 months for prep. And oh, whoops, I'm sorry about the typo. I just realized the September one. But either way, so I would leave about 3 to 5 months for the prep. All right, so continuation. Now these changes were actually going to come into play anyway, regardless of COVID. It just so happened to line up and work out for the ACT. So with the ACT, a couple of things are happening in September. First one, students can take the paper exam or they can take computer-based exam. Computer-based exam, you get your results a lot faster. It's in 2 days. Again, as of right now, we don't know if the online exam, actually, yeah. So as of right now, we don't know exactly how they're going to execute this because no one has said, oh yeah, we're going to go ahead and cancel. So ultimately, even if you are taking an online exam, in the ideal scenario, that was going to be at a testing location. That was not going to be a take from home on my own computer exam. That's why I said right now, we're still waiting for this to come up. And all the changes and such to come up. But either way, whether it's a paper exam or whether it's an online exam, you would have been at a testing location. All right, then the second change coming up is the full, so it's retesting. And this is why I was, when I was referring to the science section, I said that's how it used to be. So with retesting, now the ACT lets you actually, so first you take the full length exam and you have a full score. Then should you look at the breakdown, so for example, let's look at this. Let's say you look at the breakdown and you took the September exam and you notice that, okay, well, this was my full length score. I received a 21. Because these scores, every single section is scored out of 36. And then these numbers are just added together for a score out of, or averaged out, I should say. They're averaged out for a total composite score out of 36. Now, based on the retesting rule, once you have your full exam score, you can choose what sections you want to retake. So now referring to that science score that initially was low, you can retake just that section if you want. And you can retake maybe the math section if you want. And those will then be considered for your new super score. So that's the third change, is now the ACT super scores. Originally, it really depended on the universities, but most universities super scored the SAT, but not the ACT. And because of that one huge disadvantage, when it came to taking the ACT, it was, because of that huge disadvantage, ACT went ahead and made this change. So now when it comes to scoring, you're a little more at level. And when it comes to those retesting, you're really just taking those sections and walking out. So there's no reason to stay any longer than that. And yes, there is a price difference. You don't pay the full price of the exam. So they do have pretty much discounting. And then while referring to the super scoring concept, again, this is just an example of how that played out for the SAT. So if I had a student, or let's say I actually took this test and I had 3 separate SAT scores. Really what a university automatically did, if I just sent in my highest 2 exams, would be they would take the highest of the reading, then they would take the highest of math, and the new score considered for my admissions would be the total score of that. So they don't care about any of my original scores. They really only care about that 1310. All right, so with that said, I'm just going to turn over to the chat for a couple of questions. Whoops, did not mean to do that. So I was going to turn over to the chat. All right, and I guess put myself on full screen. So one of the questions I have here, benefits of taking the SAT and ACT. So really the benefits for this, when it comes to, I don't actually recommend taking both. I recommend picking one because the strategies and the content, particularly for math that will be covered, are actually, they're different. The strategies particularly, because as we said, with the ACT, it's much more of a time crunch. So the prep that goes into that, the drilling that goes into that is going to be different. With that said, the follow-up question tends to be, how do you figure out which exam to take? So a lot of test prep companies tend to do free mock exams. For example, I know that Bridgewater Prep right here locally does that. I know that Princeton Review does that. And again, I am not affiliated with any of these companies. These are just a couple of resources. College Board also releases 8 practice tests. Those are free, and you can easily just find them online. They're also linked with Khan Academy. But you can just take mock exams from these locations. Whichever exam it is that you tend to do higher on, I recommend just centering and focusing on that. Or whichever exam you now notice and you like the format of, because ultimately with the ACT, the whole section retake is a huge advantage. I will mention that. But we haven't really seen it play out just yet. So until then, I recommend taking a mock exam just to see how both exams go. Whichever is the highest, whichever one's most comfortable, that is the one you take. SAT, again, it's a little more spread out in timing. It's not common for students to wait out and have an extra 10 minutes left to kill. But ACT is very much a time crunch. So if you're one of those people that just works really well under pressure, then that ACT it might be something to consider. All right, since that seems to be the only question at the moment, I will go ahead and continue. And again, please feel free to continue posting questions. I will get to them, even if they're not, even if they come up later and we've moved past that topic, that's perfectly fine. So with that, up next, we're going to cover how to do university research and college tours. So once again, we have the more in-depth session about the SATs, ACTs on June 6th, and you can register on Mark Twain Library's website and look under the teens and adults events. So moving a little bit forward. All right, now when it comes to COVID-19, the campus tour changes. Of course, as we discussed earlier, there are virtual tours. In addition to that, a lot of universities have offered up the option to attend actual classes. And finally, you can also speak to current students. This is actually very important because even if you don't end up going to campus soon, at least you would, so even if you don't end up going to campus anytime soon, at least you have an idea and a feel for what normal campus life would be when that time does come. So current students are probably the best resource for this entire process, or at least for the tour part of this process, because they give you a solid idea of the ups, downs, which dining hall has the worst food, which one has the best food, what events are awesome, what resources universities provide, and so forth. So some universities do allow you to speak to current students, and they have a whole platform set up, usually through Facebook. But again, that you can find out through the university's website. Now, while it doesn't seem like there could possibly be any benefits to not seeing a campus and walking around and getting a feel for it, or sitting in some of like the cafes and watching the movement, people watching and so forth, one of the best benefits, it's free. So really you can take a lot of tours because now it's done at the convenience of your own house. And then of course you get to attend class. Now attend class, I keep repeating that because that was not an option that was offered before. attending class was not a thing. And it has really become more of an option now with the COVID changes happening. So previous students, they haven't really had this opportunity to attend a class. But since you are going there for, an education, it might be a good idea to find out just what kind of an education setting you could be walking in on. Whoops. Okay, so with that said, a couple of resources. Now, there are some really good websites that come up. So when you're starting your college search, just everything from scratch, let's say you have 0 universities in mind, you don't know where to even begin, I recommend using College Board's college search feature. And that pretty much, it lets you navigate universities. Okay, so with College Board's college search feature, you can navigate universities based on filters. So you can filter through what you like, what you don't like, and just go from there. Naviance is also a really good tool. And I know with everyone here, you're connected to Naviance already. So roughly the results you get from College Board's college search and from Naviance, they tend to overlap. So that's not an issue. Then when it comes to so campus tours, sorry, I didn't realize I automated that. But so when it comes to campus tours, one website that's pretty helpful is campustours.com. And really, it's just sort of a database collection of different universities' websites. So all it really does is just help you get to that page on the university's website. And it's a fast way to pretty much schedule your campus tours and see what's available. Now, next up, we have another option is just navigating the university's website on your own. Now, sorry, I think I somehow did the timing wrong. Anyways, so navigating the university's website on your own. Now, this gets really annoying. Flat out, university websites have no uniform format that just all across the country, this is the wording used, this is the format used, nothing of that sort. So you can click on one tab and the information you get for that label would be completely different at another university's website. So just because you see a label doesn't necessarily mean that's what you'll end up getting. But in the end, I recommend simply just running, if you do want to do it on your own, just Google the name of the university and then virtual campus tours, and you'll get to the page that you need. Now, some universities have just virtual seminars instead. So you get on with the admissions officer and they tell you about the university and so forth. At this point, just anything you have available, take it. So, all right, so with that said, finally moving on to the key points on this. So first key point on this is that if you haven't already, start your college search, make a list of approximately 8 to 10. National average tends to, and it depends on, again, the difficulty level of the universities that you're applying to, but make a list. Most students tend to apply to 8 to 10 universities. But again, start and feel free to just explore. There is no cost to it. It's just a time thing. So spend the time and just look through the universities and what information they have available online. A lot of these universities also have YouTube pages and social media that, okay, realistically, we all ignored. Realistically, we all ignored it before, but now that internet is really where we're getting all our information, now we care that they have a YouTube page and what others have to say about it. They have an Instagram or whatever else. So find those pages. Then see if you can, again, I know AP exams are happening right now, and I know finals may or may not be coming up soon, depending on what the school decides, what the class decides to do. But schedule a couple of campus tours and virtual sessions just for the upcoming weeks to get a feel for them, if you haven't already done or tried any. And again, this will keep you moving along in this process, so you're not falling behind and you're not backed up with a lot of work when time actually comes and deadlines actually come around. So ultimately, go ahead and schedule them, and have a method of actually keeping track. So I know with College Board's college search, everyone at this point has a College Board account just because of PSATs. So You can sign in and keep a list on College Board, and College Board lets you just make your own add to your list. Naviance does the same thing, but if you prefer, and I'm actually a bigger fan of just keeping it on an Excel sheet or Google sheet, because that lets me also track the financial situation of, okay, well, what's the tuition? What's the location? What did I submit already? What's the average SAT score I need to keep track of? Did I send in, like, what recommendations do they need? So I can actually just pretty much the word is slips my mind, but I can be very specific and personalize what I need it to be. Next up, so when you are conducting the research, there are a couple of points that you need to, and resources that you should make sure that you have, and that goes with student support. So while you will be there in a university, there are certain, and university settings are different. Some classes are only about, 50 classes or 50 students big, and some are 200. So it's really not it varies a lot. But what you don't get necessarily is the same attention that you did from your professors or from your teachers as you did in high school. And when you're looking at a university, there should be a couple of things to keep in mind. First one is exploring career paths. So at 16, at 17, maybe even at 18, you don't know what it is you want to do with your life. You haven't seen everything. And that's normal. That doesn't make you unusual. And I know people are going to ask you, oh, what do you want to major in? What do you think you want to do? And I kind of do that, but I blame it on my job. Um, I totally do that, but I can blame it on my job and it's great. But it's kind of stressful when you're looking at a 16, 17-year-old and saying, okay, great. Do you know what you want to do for the rest of your life? Especially because most people, especially as our new generations come on, we tend to have 3 to 5 careers, not just jobs, but careers in our lives. So you shouldn't expect too much of yourself when it comes to picking the right and putting the pressure on yourself. But at the same time, universities, the career resource centers, the advising, you do want to know what this university is going to do to help you find out what you like. Because again, you're going there for an education. They have a pool of students there who don't know what they want to do. And that's, again, normal, frustrating, but normal. So what do these universities do? Some universities have career center resources where they help you do personality quizzes and career exams. Those can be helpful. Some of them are crappy. But again, some do that. Some do like an interview process. Some have a whole series of just, okay, here's what we're going to do. Yeah, we'll do a personality test first, then we'll do this test. And then, you know what? You're going to talk to people and here's how you're going to do it. And then ultimately you're going to do this, da, 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 da. So they have an actual setup for that. Some just say, oh no, you're an exploratory major. Just go ahead and take a bunch of variety of classes and see what happens, and see what you like, which that's a little difficult because just because you like a class doesn't necessarily mean you'll like the job. So just something to keep in mind. Career center resources, again, what can they help you with? Do they help you find internships? Do they do some sort of student matching program? Do they have career fairs? A lot of large universities, tend to do these career fairs once every semester. And that's when you meet up in, the university's gym or basketball, whatever the university has. And you have a bunch of tables and you have the local companies that come and recruit or just talk to you about their company. So does the career center do that? Do they help you prep for interviews? Where one of the counselors from the center sits down and runs you through a mock interview. Do they help you with resumes? So find out what it is, because you're in college. The next step after that is a job market or an internship, something like that. So you want to know, how is this phase of my life going to help you transition to the next one? And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, you want to know what kind of academic support you're going to have. So most universities have some sort of a peer-to-peer tutoring center. They also have some sort of a peer-to-peer writing center. And ultimately, you want to know what kind of academic support you're going to have. So example of this. Now, if you go to a large state university, so initially, my first university I went to was the University of Florida. Amazing university, but it's very big. And that means if I want to be in touch with a resource, I have to be proactive about it. So Advising, I went maybe once a year, um, which is it doesn't seem important, but you have to realize that when you're a high school student transitioning to a college atmosphere, which means this is the first time you're away from home. This is the first time you're in charge of putting your life together. Um, and on top of that, you have a whole different education setup. Now, in my classroom was me and 200 of my closest friends. So it's different. And that means I have to be proactive and sign up. But and one of my students is going to American University, and with American University, students are required to have an advisor and to meet with their advisors once a week, and that's just a given. They have a small class group, a small group, and the advisor gets to talk to the students. You find out about their resources. You get a feel for just how students are feeling. Because again, with emotional, this is the first time away from home, so usually first semester, as exciting as it is, some students do get very homesick, and that's something that usually universities will tell you at orientation. And I know my dad, when they when I had my University of Florida orientation, my but they separated us out. So my dad was in with the adults and the parents, and then we were off touring campus or something. And I don't know what they said to freak my dad out, but it was something on the lines of, your your daughter or your son will call you, like begging to just come home, and you have to let them through the first semester. Just say no. Don't let them come home. And so my dad just completely freaked out. And every time I called him, he's like, "So are you homesick yet? Don't be depressed. Don't do this. Remember, it's okay. This is just a normal experience," and so forth. Um, but that tends to happen, and that leads to mental health. Now, I legitimately have students who have AD, ADHD. You have the 504 plan, and you've had it for high school. You've used it for your SATs or ACTs, or you're planning to use it. Great, but now you want to find out what can you do in college. How does this apply? Especially if you're going to a large university, like I mentioned, like University of Florida. Well, okay, how does this play out when it's me and 200 of my closest friends in a classroom? How does that work out for testing? Um, because our exams were in a huge auditorium setting, and some are in a smaller setting. So again, how does that play out? I also have students who severely have diagnosed anxiety. So you want to know who you have to talk to at that university. Because bottom line is you're paying quite a lot for this university education and experience. So make sure you keep those resources in mind before you even need them. Because if you don't need them, okay, great, but now you knew they were there. It would suck to find out 3 years in when you needed the resources that, oh, I could have used that back then, didn't know that existed. So again, just something to know. All right. Taking a break now and moving to the Q&As. And after that, we're going to cover personal statements and interviews. So, all right, couple of questions. First one was for a rising senior who has not taken a test yet, should he, and what are the chances that there will be an opportunity to retest to super score? So based on the exam dates, there are actually going to be a lot of opportunities to test because so applications, and I will show you a visual with the application timelines and so forth, but just to give you a rough idea right now, most application deadlines, not all, some might be a little bit earlier in October, but most application deadlines tend to be in November. So usually November 1st, November 15th, or January 1st, January 15th. As of right now, universities have not changed those dates. So any rising senior, because I imagine right now, most of my juniors, so they are all rising seniors, most of them have not had the opportunity to take the SAT or ACT. And coming up in the next year, you can test in August, you can test in September, October, and even if your application deadline is in November, you can still test in November. The difference is you just have to send your score in automatically before you even see it. But even if you don't count November, you still have August, September, October to take your test. So there are still plenty of opportunities to take your SATs or ACTs and submit your scores. Then the question is, how does taking a gap year affect future applications, and how do universities generally view gap years? Well, all right, so when it comes to gap years, it really depends on what you did during that gap year. because there are students who travel. There are students who just want to work so they can have money to pay for college. But ultimately, universities care more about what did you learn? And that's not just a gap year thing, that's actually part of your entire application. When you're filling out all of these activities and so forth, universities aren't just concerned about, oh, what, you took a gap year, great, cool. But what did you learn? Did you just stay at home and do your basic chores and hang out with your friends and that was it? Or did you do something during that? Did you travel? And again, you don't have to travel. Did you work? Did you volunteer? What was it that you did? And that's what actually impacts your application more than how long your gap year was. When you are taking a gap year, it works in one of two ways. So first one is you can apply and go through this entire college application process, submit your application. Then when you are accepted, you can then apply to start and send in a request to start in a year later or a semester later. And in that case, the university that has already accepted you will simply ask you to write an essay as to what your plans are, and explain your justification for taking that gap year. The second option is simply to not apply. And even if you choose to not apply, you should know that SATs and ACT scores are valid for 5 years. So get those out of the way. Now, with that said, so with gap years, you can just hold off for the application cycle and just apply later. In that case, you just simply explain what it is that you did during your gap year, and that's it. So that doesn't count as a negative. All right, so when do you, next question is, when would you recommend starting college searching age-wise? So when it comes to age, I recommend starting sophomore year is before I would have actually said when you're in high school and you happen to go on a vacation or something and you pass by a university campus, just go drive through it or go walk around through it simply to get a feel. And that the ninth grader now gets more and more of an idea of what a college campus looks like and just starts getting comfortable, because initially campuses can be a little intimidating, particularly when you don't have an older sibling and you are the oldest child going into college. Then it's a little intimidating. So that's what I would have said before this COVID shutdowns and differences. Now I would say right now, if you're a current sophomore going into junior year, this is a good time to just start your search. A lot of research, again, this is totally teenage level. It's your comfort zone because everything is online. You can watch as many YouTube videos as you want on this university. A lot of universities have their YouTube channels. A lot of them have some sort of Instagram or some other social media thing going on. They have the virtual tours and everything. So it's really just definitely start before junior year starts. And it's never too late, as you're all seeing right now. Even if we didn't have COVID, it still wouldn't be too late to start right now. It's later in the process, which means you might have a little more work to do in terms of exploring and research, but you can even start now if you haven't done so. But at the earliest, I do recommend sophomore year. All right, so with that, looks like we don't have any more questions. So we're going to return back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so next up we have personal statements and interviews. After that, we are going to cover what should you do now. And finally, after that, we'll cover a timeline. So you'll see exactly what it is in the what should you do now and what test dates come into play and how it's laid out. Okay, so personal statement topics are out. This is a move completely independent of the entire COVID situation, because Common App, which is the one application platform for most universities, it's the one website that collects multiple different applications so that students don't have to go to 10 different websites. They can just go to the one and fill out the applications. So Common App releases the essay topics pretty much January. Every January, the topics come out. So that means juniors right now, you knew your topics 4 months or 5 months ago. which is not to say anybody actually starts writing their essays or anything, but it's available should you want to. Okay, then topics include just basic, it's a personal statement, and very much personal statement by definition. So it's all about you. Did you expand on a certain experience you've had, or personal growth or a moment of personal growth, or when you overcame an obstacle, or when a view that you have was challenged, and then what did you do about it, that sort of thing. And the final topic, so there are 7 topics, and the 7th topic is always share an essay of your own choosing. Now, when it comes to the topics, it does not matter which essay topic you choose. All that matters is what you write for that essay. So yes, there are some topics that are just chosen more frequently, but ultimately no university really cares about that. Universities just care about what it is, what story did you tell? Which then brings me to the point of, before you tell your story, remember that a stranger is reading it. So this isn't just you're not assuming that this person knows anything about you. So keep in mind, before you start writing, what personality traits do you want them to know that you possess? And how should the reader feel about you? Are you going to be the, oh great, one more COVID-19 essay? Or are you going to be the, okay, and some of the viral essays where, oh, when I ordered pizza from Papa John's, or I went to Costco, and again, those are surface level topics that are used to explore an in-depth meaning. So the Costco trip that I believe that essay went viral 2 years ago was just about, she was pointing out how this was a mother-daughter moment, and it was about how this was something that she did with her mother, and it was just continued on as a transition of their relationship. So it's something like that, where you're using something surface level to explore, but ultimately, couple of resources to help you out. So for sample essays, I recommend going to Johns Hopkins Essays That Worked. First of all, if you want to locate the essays, just Google, and I actually tested these out beforehand. So I know that if you just type these in, it will be the first link that pops up. So Google Common App first year essay prompts, and that will give you the topics. Then after that, for sample essays, Google Johns Hopkins Essays That Worked. Now, a lot of universities release these essays that worked, and they post the essays. However, I prefer the Johns Hopkins website, because it not only gives you the students' essays that worked, but the admissions committee provides feedback as to why they worked. And that's really the valuable part. It's not just, let's see what other students wrote. It's, okay, let's see what other students wrote, but how is the admissions committee going to perceive it? What did they like about it? Because ultimately that's what you're aiming for. When you are reading through these sample essays, note the format note the format that students choose. There's no just one format, and it's different from a lot of writing pieces that you would have done in school. So there's no one format. There's no one approach or topic. I mean, one of the essays in there is just on potatoes, and she talked about in some way potatoes, but again, it elaborated. There's another essay on there from last year, I believe, and that was done in a recipe format. So again, it doesn't matter which format you pick, and take a look at them, see, just to open up your mind to the possibilities. And then on top of personal statements, there's something called supplemental essays. And supplemental essays are shorter. They're usually 250 words. Some universities go higher and say 450 words max, but ultimately these are very specific to the university. So questions for these will be, why us? Why NYU? Why Tufts? Even when they make this creative, ultimately that's the bare bones of it. Why us? Or what do you hope to get out of it? Or what do you hope to bring in and contribute? Those require research, and research means you can't just say, oh, why us? Well, I really love the atmosphere. I have a cousin who went there and she said it was amazing because of such and such and such and such and such. That doesn't count. Instead, you have to do research into the different departments. So like I mentioned with the career resource, you could do research on that. You could do research on if you're interested in something, a particular department. So for example, I have a student who's interested in meteorology, weather, basically. So in his case, he would actually look at that department for that university and see who is the staff, what kind of research do they do, and actually find individuals, professors who could serve as advisors and mentors. You don't have to contact them or anything, but that's one approach is you find the individuals, the professors, the who can serve as mentors and guide you through this. Then you look into programs that the university might have. So okay, am I interested in study abroad? Okay, well, I'm interested in study abroad, but I'm interested in going study abroad with my particular major. And that becomes a little more difficult because not every study abroad program really incorporates your major. There will be some common ones like business is a very common one where they could do a study abroad and it's totally worth it. Um, Sciences could work, but then there are some where maybe you have one class that you'd end up taking abroad, but then the other classes are immersion of some sort. So do the research on that. And again, that's something you could talk about in your supplemental essay. Um, Common App has these topics listed most of the time, but that's only if you've actually created the account, put the university in your doc of universities that you're interested in. Then it comes up. However, and again, sort of the foolproof way of locating your topic is just to locate it via Google. Just Google the name of the university and supplemental essay topics, and they'll pop up. All right, so then moving to the next page once. Okay, which brings us to interviews. Now, with interviews, not all universities require them, but they are recommended. So why? First of all, because now you're adding a dimension to yourself that's not on paper. You're an actual person who talks, who has interests that are not mentioned, that you just didn't have enough word count to mention on paper. But you're a person. Usually the format for the interview or the interviews, yeah, would have been in person or through an alum, so in person at the university location, or if you live further away from the university, then it would have been done through an alumni, so someone who just went there, or if that even was not an option, probably through Skype or FaceTime. Chances are now we're looking more through Skype and FaceTime. And again, that too will be updated once we find out more about it. So questions for these include just the basic, they're sort of like job interview questions, simply just changed out the word company for university. So tell us about yourself, what are you interested in, or why are you interested in this in university, strengths and weaknesses, and so forth. Keep in mind that you want to keep your tell me about yourself to about 1.5 minutes, maximum 2 minutes, because otherwise you're rambling, which fun fact, since I am talking, it seems like I'm talking to myself. It kind of seems like I'm rambling right now. But you want to give yourself a time cutoff. So roughly 1 minute to 1.5 minutes for all the other questions. Tell me about yourself could be about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. But again, practice. There's no better way to find out than to practice. And when I say practice, you're not writing the paragraph out that you're going to memorize, then regurgitate. You're simply writing out bullet points that you want to make sure you mention. So it's a normal conversation, but just like I have the slides out in front of me right now so that I know, okay, I need to move to that topic and then I need to mention that. You just want to give yourself some guidance as to what you can mention and what you should make sure you mention, because you're endorsing yourself. So, and we're not used to that, especially not at that age of 16, 17, 18. We're not used to really endorsing ourselves. So practice this. All right, and then, so the next slide should be question and answer. So I'll go through them again, but admission cycles. So these are common words and terms you will hear. First one's early action. So when you hear that a university has an early action deadline, that means the university is offering you a non-binding application. So really it's just a normal deadline but you get to submit it early. That's also, that falls under that demonstrated interest category that we talked about back on that second slide. Um, Fewer people apply for early action simply because there's nothing at stake, so more people are procrastinating. Um, and as such, it always plays into your favor to apply early if you really do know where if you would like to go. It's not binding at all, so you're not stuck in a situation. Early decision, on the other hand, is binding. And in fact, when you complete your application, the parents will get a email that provides you a link to essentially you're signing a contract. You're providing an electronic signature for a contract. So it's binding. And binding means that barring any financial issues that you have proof for, there will be, you are determined and dedicated, committed, I should say, to attending this university. Okay, and then after that, you have regular and okay, and regular deadlines tend to be somewhere that's just oh, I turned it in and then we'll find out in March how we did. Rolling admissions, so that term refers to an ongoing cycle, meaning from starting from, let's say, August or September all the way up until March, we're going to go keep rolling out, accepting admissions and rolling out decisions. And that means you submit an application. So if I submit my application, let's say in November, they'll let me know a month later. So they'll let me know in December if I was accepted or not. And that's what the rolling cycle means. Even again, I think this sort of, you probably already figured I was going to say this, but the earlier you apply, the better, simply because there are more seats available. All right, so before we move on to the what should you do next, we're going to take a quick break and do a Q&A. So, all right, so one related to SAT, ACT, and the question is that if you anticipate lowish exam scores, should you take exams and look for exam optional schools, or can you take and not submit the scores? Honors an AP student, but very recently diagnosed ADHD. Now, this is actually a pretty common question I get. So with this, I would say, if your GPA and your classwork stands up for it, then in that case, I would not worry too much about your SAT or ACT score. Because if you're very recently diagnosed ADHD, and then you need to go in and move forward with a 504 plan. With that said, if it's anticipated lowish, but it's anticipated lowish scores simply because of the ADD or ADHD, then it really just depends on the tiers of university you're applying to. So for example, if you're applying to, let's say, and I use the example of NYU or BC or some of those like the top 20 universities, then it would be worth it to have an SAT or ACT score. However, if you're applying to more of a state university or just somewhere, a little bit lower down in the tier, then it's fine to have a test optional university. It's not going to really count against you as long as the rest of your academic record stands strong. Okay, so I really hope I answered your question. And with that, since that seems to be the only question, we're going to move on to the second to last part. So what should you do next? All right, so what should you do next? I just took a quick talking break since I've been speaking for a while. But I'll give you a moment to just take a look at the visual. This SST means SAT subject test, and then you have the SAT and ACT dates for this upcoming year listed out. Okay, so if you're currently a sophomore and going into junior year, then right now is a good time to have that college discussion. And I do recommend that SATs and ACTs have them done at least twice by December. Most of my students, so when I start working with my students, most of us, we start between, I have them start before they enter junior year. So that's summer. And my first batch of students, we really finished a lot of our testing by the holidays. So they had taken 2 to 3 SATs and they were done.
And that means that second semester, you can now focus on your college search and whatever else you need to get done. Same principle applies here, which is the earlier the better when it comes to SATs, ACTs. I am not recommending that you register for August. In fact, I recommend waiting it out to see how this plays out with the online, with potentially online testing or with COVID and whatnot. So no, do not sign up for the August exam. You have the luxury of time, but at least start prepping, because summer will be the freest you will be when it comes to time commitments. When school starts, you'll have your schoolwork or projects or maybe extracurriculars or whatever starting up. So at least do your prep in advance, and then it's just upkeep is easier than trying to learn during school. Have your college discussion. So again, you can also just start the college search, play around on College Board or on Naviance to see what options pop up. And from that, we can see what's, yeah, so then, so see what options pop up, see what you like, take the tours, just explore. Don't be caught trying to do this last minute and rushing it. Take the time to explore, because the more you explore, the more you're going to realize, oh wait, but like that university over there had this option. Let me go back to the other one and see if they had that too, because until now, I hadn't even considered that this service should be available, or this academic major or whatever should be available, or support should be available. So do the tours. If you like them, great. If not, you didn't lose anything. Second semester, so again, this is for upcoming juniors. So if you're going to be a junior next year, second semester is when you want to do your retakes. Take the SAT subject test if needed. So to give you an idea, SAT subject tests are asked of by competitive universities as an additional score. They're all 1 hour exams. They're always multiple choice. So it's not a written exam in any way. It's just multiple choice, 1 hour exam. You're in and you're out, and you can take up to 3 in one sitting. Subjects for these include math, level 1, level 2, which means you have with pre-calc and without pre-calc. Then you have 3 different sciences, so biology, chemistry, and physics. You have an English Lit exam. You have 2 different histories, I believe, US history and world history. And then you have about 6 to 8 different language options, because you will have one version of a language and then you'll have that with listening. So if I have French, then French with listening is a different exam. So those are, again, for competitive, they're okay, actually, to clarify, they're for either competitive universities, so as an additional score to measure you by. They are for, even for non-competitive, that's necessarily like the competitive universities, if there's a specific major that you're going for, like engineering, well, then it makes sense that those, the admissions committee needs to know what your math and science background are. And for that, you might have to take the SAT subject test for. And finally, if you're applying to a test flexible university. So a test flexible university like NYU, and NYU has not changed to test optional or anything, but because they originally had a test flexible policy anyway. Test flexible means that a university will accept either 3 AP scores, 3 SAT subject test scores, or international baccalaureate exam scores instead of the standard SAT or ACT. So basically, instead of submitting just that SAT or ACT, you now have other options you can submit in their place. When it comes to this SAT subject test, they're not tricky, meaning there's no wordplay that will confuse you. This is very much a sort of like an in-school exam that you would take, where it's all straightforward. Here's the question, you either know it or you don't style. So it's nothing like the regular SAT or the regular ACT at all. So if needed, and again, this comes as a part of doing your university research. So when you're conducting this research, look at what the exam requirements are. From that, you will figure out if this is a necessity or if it's something you can just ignore. Of course, it's important to maintain your grades. And then finally, the college tours, attend those online classes for college, and talk to the students that currently go there. And I'm sure a lot of the students are now realizing, the current college students are realizing, if their university is really up to speed or not, depending on how their online classes are going. Because some universities, they're getting a lot of complaints that their online classes are awful, and some are perfectly fine. So you'll figure out just how ready that university is to support students in odd situations like these. And just a fun fact for parents, this is usually when students start getting a little bit terrified of college and of life. So second semester, I know this junior year was just odd completely, and we are all now in a whole different bubble. But ultimately in second semester junior year is when things get a little more frightening, simply because this is when they realize that they will be moving away from home, they will have to know what they want to do with their lives, and the fear just kicks in. So there's a little more anxiety if you have just the way I've seen it play out. And I'm not saying this is an umbrella applicable to everyone, but with girls, they tend to argue a little more, and the frustration comes out. For guys, they internalize it. So this is when they just start ignoring you. I've also had moms tell me that their sons do that anyway. So how do you know the difference? And I have no idea. But ultimately, when it comes to college related, I recommend just setting time aside to talk, pre-scheduled time, not just, do not spring this on students, because that's when you're going to get the backlash. So pre-schedule it, set up homework if there is anything to get done, and then actually have the conversations, because now the student is prepared for it. You're not blindsiding them with what someone else's kid is doing and what's going on over there. It's all collected, communicated, moved on. Okay, so then I kind of laid out the schedule down here just so everyone has a visual, but really what happens is midterms tend to happen in December or January. In our case with Barlow, that's going to be in January. So students are going to be really busy around that time. Then again, this is still junior year. Talking May right now, as we are all seeing, AP exams are running, and June is when finals happen, which in this year's case, if they happen in the first place. Ultimately, and my main point of including this visual, you want your testing out of the way before your school events kick in. And that was one of the flaws of the original SAT system as we're applying right now, that a lot of students wait until the spring for SATs and ACTs, but really you have quite a bit going on for that. That's a lot of testing happening. So it's too much to cram for, and you're not giving yourself the best shot. In addition to that, if you need to take subject test with APs and with finals, this is when I recommend taking that subject test, because you don't have to study twice for that same subject. You're already studying for, let's say, the AP bio test. So you should just take the SAT subject, the bio subject test, right then. And that way it's all off your plate. Same thing goes with math, right? If you're already studying for your math final, which can or cannot include pre-calculus, well, great. Then just take your SAT subject test then and get it out of the way. So roughly that's usually when I recommend SAT subject tests happen, if it needs to happen. All right, and this is the boat that most of my students are in right now, which is where the testing is off. We have no idea what we're supposed to do at this point. Never taken an SAT before because we were planning to do it in March, then in May, then in June. Same thing with the ACT. So what's going to happen now? Well, if you haven't started already, then I recommend, well, if you haven't started already and decide to move forward with the SAT or ACT, I recommend starting prep over the summer. Because like I've mentioned before, this is as commitment free as you're going to get. And especially, for example, with my students, when we do this, I assign them a lot of homework, and I don't feel guilty about it because there's no schoolwork that's conflicting. I'm not taking time away from their sleep or from their essay writing or whatever it is. So it's easier to give you an hour's worth of homework because it's necessary. And now is the time when we can find that hour, and I can expect it to be executed properly, and as close to test settings as possible. So summer, I recommend, if you're planning to start your SAT, ACT prep. After that, also start writing, or write actually over the summer, finish writing your personal statements and your supplemental. Get all of the writing out of the way. Never underestimate the writing you will have to do. Never underestimate the number of drafts you will have to write because you're sick of the first one, or you just feel that you found a better idea. Like I said before, at least the personal statement topics are already out. The new topics for the supplementals they'll come out in June. However, most universities recycle previous year's essays. So if you wanted to just do the research, find the websites for those universities will have the supplemental essay topics. They might be from the last admission cycle and not this one. So just look them up to get an idea, but personal statement topics for sure. Your personal statement can be done. And then start and complete your college application. So again, just because the deadlines might be in November or might be in December, doesn't necessarily mean you have to wait that long. So get everything off your plate or as much as you can off your plate. Because roughly the application cycle opens somewhere between July and August, depending on the university, which means you can fill out your application in advance. You just can't hit submit until it actually opens. So everything could be ready to go from your end. The recommendations, the essays, the actual details that you have to fill out, they can all be done and ready to go. So with that, and then of course, deadlines come around, could be in November, could be in December, but at least that's sort of where it extends out to. Now with interviews, there we go. So moving out of the summer and into the actual school year. So as a senior, you can still take the test. And actually there should be an SAT in September since we have that new change. So you still have 5 opportunities to take that exam. So you still have 5 opportunities to take that exam before those January deadlines. If deadline is in December, you can still take the December exam. You just have to submit automatically directly to the school. But even if you didn't want to do that and the deadline was, let's say, in November, and you want to see your score before you send it, you still have August, September, and October. With the ACT, you have July for now, barring any changes, but at least you'll have September, October before you have the November. So there are still plenty of opportunities if you do want to take the test. I know things got a little bit janky with cancellations and so forth, but by no means is anyone really going to struggle when it comes to these takes and retakes. Just on the subject of retakes, 3 and done, maximum. If you decide to take the SAT or ACT, and again, take a mock exam with some prep company or just online through College Board's free exams or with ACT's exams, and see which one you do better on, that's the exam you focus on. Now follow up to that. Once you decide to choose an exam and either prep for it on your own or with someone, however you decide, take it 3 times and call it done. If you take it more than 3 times, you're really just prolonging this process. And I found that with students they tend to burn out. You burn out because you're looking at this material for too long, and now you're into the school year when other things also need to get done. So roughly when it comes to retakes, 3 and done. How you space them out is up to you. How much you study for them is up to you. How much time and effort you put in is totally up to you. But some universities will see the full score report because they'll ask you for the full score history, and some will just ask you to send your top scores. So if you send only the top scores, you could have taken these exams 10 times and no one would ever know. Or you could have taken it, but roughly just 3 is a good number to stop at. Now, there was another question that I tend to get. Oh, what if it's not possible to accidentally send your SAT score or ACT score to a university? You have to pay for those reports. So you will know when when the score is going to be sent in, because they're going to ask for your credit card number. All right, so with that, you have, again, with the first semester, so now, again, you're finishing up on the virtual tours or classes. You've done or are planning to do your early decision or early action. Again, deadlines tend to be, and I say tend to be because, again, there's no uniformity, but a good chunk of universities have kind of chosen the November 1st, November 15th, and January 1st, January 15th as their deadlines. but there are universities that have October deadlines and so forth. So just be sure when you're doing your research, you keep track of that. This is why I mentioned I prefer an Excel sheet, because I can just have all my deadlines in one page for all my universities. So ultimately, you're done with that. Oh, interviews. So you have to register for an interview if it's offered. Some universities require interviews, and when they require them, it's you have to do them when you submit your application. Some are, oh no, you submit your application. If you move forward, then we'll interview you. And some are just optional. So bottom line, even if it's optional or you're free to sign up for an interview, go ahead and do it. Interview registration happens again when the school year opens. So September, August, September, and interviews can take place anytime, usually between then and January, based again on when the university's deadlines are. So always make sure that you take the time to register. Okay. Application deadlines, maintain your grades. That's very, very important, especially now that extracurricular activities are off the table for the foreseeable future. Your grades hold a lot of value. So be sure to put in any effort, every effort you need to maintain your grades. And then of course, second semester of senior year is a little more fun because you just get to complete any remaining applications, which really second semester I'm referring to like January. There are some that have February deadlines, but not a lot. Maintain your grades and finish your interviews. After that, regular decisions come out towards the end of March and beginning of April. And usually you have to commit by May. And that's very loose because, well, it was very loose this time. But commitment by May 1st is the general. But this year it fell into a June. Some universities moved their May 1st commitment day to June 1st, just to give families more time to find out more about COVID, what's going on, and just get updates so they can make decisions. But once you do that, you get to send in your final transcripts, and then you are done. So at this point, because we're done with all the topics that we're talking about, I do want to mention that if you do have any, let's see, so just a quick reminder that we are going to be hosting an in-depth dive at the SAT, ACT, and the current updates as they come in on June 6th. Please note, again, just a quick reminder that registration for the SAT will begin the week of May 26th. ACT, you can still register for the June exam until May 22nd. However, if that is canceled or if there are any updates, you will find out the week of May 26th as well. You can also register for the July ACT. And again, please look on the ACT.org website. For SAT registration, that's collegeboard.org. And with that, I am going, so it looks as though, so, okay, there's one question about if you're an upcoming senior and have only taken, let's actually, whoops, let's do a quick exit. All right, so question is that if you're an upcoming senior and have only taken the PSAT, how many times do you recommend taking the SAT when it becomes available in the summer or the fall? Again, SAT, ACT, 3 and call it a day. After that, you're spending too long on one exam, and students tend to burn out or go a little bit lower on their scores. So another additional resource I do want to mention, when it came to all of these college university research, I didn't get I sort of didn't want to play with this platform and mess up and have technical difficulties. So I didn't take you online to look at some of these websites. But if you do want to explore and get more information, you can also take a look at my YouTube page, and and that will give you an idea of just how, or I just posted a video prior to doing this session, a 20-minute video that covers the details of how to conduct your college search, what you can look for. Some of the points that I mentioned on here overlap, but it's just a little bit shorter than the full hour talk. So with that, and if we do not have any more questions, then I'm just going to do a last screen share to just thank everyone for coming. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out. My email address is priyanka@letstalkcollege.org. You can also check out my YouTube channel at Talk College with Priyanka, or visit my website. And a huge thank you to the Mark Twain Library for hosting this. And a quick reminder that once again, if you have and you would like to do anything, the SAT, ACT information session, you'd like to attend it, registration for that is now open. So with all of that said, thank you so much for attending. And I hope that you got all the information that you needed from this talk, and I was able to ease your concerns. But again, if you do have questions, you can by all means shoot me an email. And I hope to see you on June 6th. Thank you. So with